All right, we are in a series, get my notes up. We're in a series called The Life We Long For. And we've been examining throughout the entire fall, Jesus' verse when he talks to the people and he says, I came that you may have life and have it abundantly. And then when asked, where does this life come from? How do we receive and obtain this life? Throughout all four Gospels, he gives a very clear answer. When they ask, what does God want from us? He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, and all your strength. Which is to say, God's gift of life is free and available, and it's ours. But our receiving of it and our walking in it takes a little effort. We don't earn that life. It is a gift. It is grace. But to receive it and to fully embody it means learning how to love God with all of our thoughts, all of our affections and desires, and then as we're going to start talking about today in the month of November, all of our power, all of our strength, all of our bodies. You see that word translated different ways in different Gospels. In the Greek, it says psyche or psyche, which is the Greek word for soul or being. To love God with all of our soul, all of our being, all of our energy. I like the way Dallas Willard talks about it. When he describes what does it mean to say God's kingdom or our kingdom, he says God's kingdom is the range of his effective will, where what he wants done is done. God's kingdom is the range of his effective will, where what he wants done is done. You also have a kingdom. Did you know that? That's good news. You have a kingdom. But it's a very small kingdom. It's a lot smaller than God's, where the range of what you want done is done. And for my kingdom, it's only one place. I can try to convince myself it's bigger than that, but it's only one place. Here's my kingdom. Olé. This is my kingdom. This is the only place where I have 100% control, where what I want done can actually be done. Anywhere else, it can be resisted. It can be said no. This is it. This is where the energy and the strength and the power resides, that I can either align my kingdom, my power, to seek the kingdom of God, or I can seek other kingdoms and other powers. So what we're going to do the month of November is we're going to ask the question, what does it mean to love God with all of our power? What does it mean to love God with all of our strength? And there's all sorts of ways. What does it mean to align our wills, as Willard says, to align the range of our effective will with God's effective will, to come under his banner? And when we say, Lord, let your kingdom come and your will be done, what does it mean to say, I want to align my will, my kingdom with your kingdom? And today we're going to talk about what is the first and most important way. There are all sorts of ways, but this one is the doorway. This one is the way that leads to all the others. So we're going to read from Matthew chapter 10. We're in Matthew's gospel for this series, verses 34 through 39. You guys with me this morning? Amen. All right. That's what Jesus says. He says, do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. Anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. You guys still with me? I do not remember reading that in Sunday school. That's just one of those, as you get older and you go to the scriptures, you're like, where's the Jesus with the little sheep? Like, I don't remember that passage, in Sunday school. This is a really fascinating and important passage. And it is one of those that the older we get, the more we step into knowing who Jesus is and learning his heart and the heart of God and what he's inviting us into. You learn two things. One, he is far wilder and unco-optable, unboxable than we thought when we were young. But also, it's never what it seems like at first glance. There's always something deeper going on that is upending our expectations of God and revealing something deeper to his heart. How many of y'all know we are 2 days from another election? We're here again. It came fast. I did not recover as a pastor from the last one. I don't know if you remember the 2020 election. I do. I remember it. And the time leading up to it was hard. And I was pretty defeated as a pastor. Not for the reasons that you might think, but it was hard because I was leading a church in Brooklyn, New York at the time, and like many of us, realizing there was so much going on in people's hearts, and it felt like the church was very much divided. There was all sorts of things that were dividing us. I would use the same word Jesus used when he says here, I've come to divide. A mother against her daughter. The word is dikadzo, split, separate. I've come to divide people. There's going to be division in families, and we certainly had it. Only, I would say, what I saw is that it wasn't Jesus dividing us, it was our political candidate du jour. And I can say this because as I watched and pastored my congregation and walked with people, I recognized where our hearts were placed. So for example, and maybe you see yourself in this, I do to a certain degree. I saw people that were angrier at the other side's vision more than they were angry at our Christian disunity. Or I saw more energy being exerted, more power being exerted to get people to vote than power being exerted to call people to tune in for worship or to pray together. I saw fear gripping both sides that were leading to gross mischaracterizations of others rather than fear of God and fear of God's ways that were being rejected by his followers. You talk about one's foes being the members of one's household. We certainly had that. And it's interesting in this passage because Jesus says, I'm coming to bring a sword. I'm coming to divide. But then as the passage goes on, notice he starts talking about whoever loves. Whoever loves father and mother more than me is not worthy of me. What we love dictates how we use our power. What we love dictates how we'll use a sword. And we certainly saw that division 2 years ago. Obviously, I'm thinking about the election right now. And I couldn't help but realize, if you read this passage, doesn't Jesus sound like a really bad politician? You know what I mean? Like imagine Jesus stepping up to his platform. It's like, all right, Jesus, what are you running for? I've come to bring a sword. Peace? No, not peace. A sword. Also, I'm coming for the hearts of your children. Right, can you imagine? He sounds like a horrible politician. Whoever loves father or mother more than me, not worthy of me. Whoever loves son or daughter more than me, not worthy of me. He sounds like a horrible politician, and at worst, he sounds like a cult leader, doesn't he? Which, hold on to that, because we'll recognize why Jesus is not a cult leader, though what he calls for does ring similar. But at the very start, even though he sounds like a politician, recognize this, that the kings of the earth, they often promise peace, but then pick up a sword, don't they? Jesus says he's bringing a sword, but then by the end of the passage, he finds himself on a cross. The kings of the earth, they promise peace, and then they make that peace through violence. Jesus says, no, I'm not coming to bring peace, I'm coming to bring a sword. But then as his life goes on, the sharpness of that sword ends up being the bluntness of a cross. And through that cross, the entire world has been separated. Revolutionaries unite. What are we doing? Are we canvassing neighborhoods? We making phone calls? No, we're dying on a cross. Who's with me? Here we have, at the very beginning, a true separation of power, of how God is going to use his power and how he's inviting us to align our usage of power with his. It is not a love that will kill in order to maintain peace. It is a love that will die to make an everlasting peace. And there is a difference. There's a difference between peacekeeping and true peacemaking. And as R.T. France says, the peace that the Messiah is bringing is much more than the absence of fighting, but a restored relationship with God. The first way that God exercises his power and invites us, if we want to follow him, that's just if. If you don't want to, that's fine. But if we want to follow him, the first way that Jesus says that I'm going to use my power and I'm inviting you to join me in using your power is to make peace by laying down your power out of love. That's what Jesus did. I have come to bring a sword, and that's going to create lasting peace. But that sword looks like me laying down my life out of love for you and for God and trust for you and for God. So what does it mean to love God with all our power? It starts with us not exercising our power to kill others in the name of keeping peace. And when you think about killing, there's all sorts of ways we do this. It's not just the physical, right? There's digital killing right now. And I've talked about this before. Cancel culture, comments on videos, all sorts of ways that we kill other people in the name of preserving what we think we have. There's political killing, campaign ads, which they are literally trying to destroy the image and the reputation of their opponent. There's economic killing. There's social killing through slander or gossip or even clicks that would preserve some vision of peace and leave others out. There's all sorts of ways that we can exert the power, the kingdom that we have, to kill others in the name of maintaining some small vision of peace that we have. And in all of those ways, Jesus says, whoever loves father or mother or political party or wealth or social position or comfort or control or their lives more than me is not worthy of me. Guys, this is the good news, but it doesn't feel very good at first. This is actually the moment in the sermon where you make for the doors. This isn't what we want. It's not what we signed up for. And yet Jesus is crystal clear. I've come to create a lasting peace that's going to feel like a sword. But it's not through the ways that you're used to. It's through laying down our power out of love. That's the primary way. That's the foundation. And in all those things that we just talked about, what you can kill over, why would we do that? We would do that to maintain some idea of our possessions, something that we think is ours. Stanley Hauerwas, he talks about how our possessions are the source of our violence. Whatever it is we think we possess, we will fight to maintain. Whatever it is that we think is ours, we will kill another to protect even our very lives, even our nations, even our churches. You know, when you look at Jesus' death, if you ever ask the question, why did Israel kill Jesus? Like, why did the leaders want to get rid of him? It actually says in the Gospels. It says the reason for it is they go to Pilate, and Pilate asks them that. Pontius Pilate is the Roman sort of leader of Judea at the time. So Israel's oppressed by Rome. Jesus is an upstart, they believe a false Messiah in their people, and they want to get rid of him. And they take him, they arrest him, they take him to Pilate, and Pilate goes, what has he done? What has he done deserving of death? And their answer is, he is subverting our nation. He's leading our people astray. He's leading our children astray, one might say. He's subverting the nation. And when you go, how is he doing that? What has he done? N.T. Wright, who's a New Testament scholar, he points to two actions the week of Holy Week, before Jesus was arrested and crucified. That really was like the straw that broke the camel's back. And the two actions were this. Most Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we'll get to that quote in a second. But Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they talk about when Jesus goes into Jerusalem the week before he dies, the first thing he does is he goes into the temple. And if you remember the story, when he goes into the temple, he causes a mess. He overturns tables. He releases animals. He makes a whip in one of them. And he says, get these things out of here. You're using all these economic things to kill, to separate, to divide people. But this place, this is a house of prayer for all people. And Israel's like, whoa, you're really disrupting our space here, our institution. And then Jesus, he gathers with his 12 disciples and he celebrates the Passover, which was the most important meal for the Jewish people. Only he does it differently, because when he takes the bread and the wine, he actually adds in his own language and he says, hey, this bread, this is my body that was broken for you. This wine, this is my blood that was given for you. Which is to say, because this Passover represented God, Yahweh, saving Israel. He's saying, yes, Yahweh has saved Israel, but he saved Israel through me. He's putting himself in line with Yahweh. So these two special things, this sacred place, the temple, and this sacred ritual, the Passover, Jesus is kind of cutting up. He's dividing them and he's recentering them around himself. He's going to Israel and he's dispossessing them. He's saying, you've created this place that's supposed to be where God and man unite, and you've made it a sacrilege. You've desecrated it. You think it's yours. It's not yours. It's never been yours. It's always been his. Be dispossessed of it. Be freed from your possessions. But how many of you know sometimes to be freed from our possessions does not feel like freedom at first? It feels like a death. And then he goes to this cherished meal. And he says, this meal, which has become a ritual and a tradition and a beautiful one that's supposed to point you to God who has saved you. You're actually loving this more than you're loving God. Jesus is dispossessing them of their beloved institutions and their beloved symbols, saying you should have loved God more than these symbols. You should have loved God to whom these symbols direct our hearts. But they didn't see it because they loved the temple more than they loved God. They loved the meal and the ritual of it more than the one to whom the ritual pointed. They loved their possessions, what they thought was theirs, and they were keeping peace more than the true and lasting peace which God is trying to establish with them as the light of the world. And so Israel thought that Jesus was subverting their nation. The leaders thought that Jesus was leading their people astray. So they arrested Jesus and they took him to Pilate. They aligned their power with Pilate's power. They aligned their will with Pilate's will. As N.T. Wright says, with that quote now, they became a pseudo-holy people intent on defeating the world with the world's methods. They picked up a sword just like Rome. But Jesus says, the sword I'm bringing looks a lot more like a cross. See, here's the thing. I actually have a lot of sympathy for the Jewish leaders. I see it in myself. They thought they were doing their jobs. They thought they were saving their people from this dangerous man. But what they had forgotten is that God had never asked them to save their people from dangerous men. God promised them and said, I'm going to save my people from dangerous men. You don't need to save. You need to teach the people to love me with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength. Don't worry about saving yourselves. I will save you because Israel, you're my possession. I will save you. You teach the people to live their lives utterly free of things, utterly dispossessed, and loving God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength. They had forgotten that their job was peacemaking, not peacekeeping. See, I actually have a lot of grace for all of us. But when I look back to what I saw in 2020, I think both sides thought that they were saving the church from going astray. Both sides felt like, hey, this other side is subverting the heart of the church, subverting the people, leading them astray. And we must save our heart of the church. We must save our people from the other side. And in so doing, we aligned our power that God has given us. We aligned it with the vision of secular politics of the day. And we so missed what Jesus is doing. Because God has never asked us to save our children. God has only asked us to teach our children to worship his Son. That is the invitation. And hear me, I am not saying that we are not able to be citizens of this earth and have a voice in democracy and play our part and have a vision. Yes, I'm saying what's our primary role? What's our primary way we use our power as followers of Jesus? And it's not to save the church. It's to call every man, woman, and child to lay down their lives and pick up the cross exactly as Jesus invited us into. To say we have no lives but the life we have in relationship with Jesus Christ. That is what we're going after. We are not trying to protect anything. We are trying to follow Jesus with everything that he's given us. Both sides were trying to protect the heart of the church. Both sides were trying to get rid of the other. And there in the middle stood Jesus with cross on his back saying, who wants to follow me? Who wants to come after me? You know, it's interesting. The week leading up to Jesus' arrest and crucifixion, when all of this broke, after the cleansing of the temple, after the redefinition of the Passover meal, there's two characters that you see in the story. And their responses to what Jesus is doing epitomize what we're talking about today. One character could not receive the type of peace that Jesus was trying to create. The other character entered into it willingly. The first, the character who could not receive it, Judas Iscariot. The second, the character who could receive it, you might know her, the woman who poured the alabaster jar of perfume on Jesus' head. Let's actually read this story to sort of set the scene from Matthew of what's going on. It says, while Jesus was in Bethany in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came to him with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume, which she poured on his head as he was reclining at the table. And when the disciples saw this, they were indignant. Why this waste, they asked? This perfume could have been sold at a high price and the money given to the poor. Aware of this, Jesus said to them, why are you bothering this woman? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. When she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever this gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will be told in memory of her. And then catch this, the very next line. Then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and asked, what are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you? So they counted out for him 30 pieces of silver. From then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand him over. Some scholars propose that when Jesus cleansed the temple and he shared the Passover, the new Passover, that awoke Judas to something he hadn't realized. Like he thought, because again, Jesus did his ministry outside of Jerusalem, and the Jewish belief is that the true Messiah needed to go to Jerusalem. And when the true Messiah came to Jerusalem, he was finally going to restore Israel to their rightful place. So Judas imagined that when they finally, those years that he was following Jesus, and Jesus was building a following, when they finally went to Jerusalem, this is the time. Israel's going to be lifted back up, re-elevated. And then they get to Jerusalem, and Jesus starts acting in a way consistent with everything he had ever said. But basically, Judas realized that how Jesus was going to restore Israel was not how he wanted it. Judas wanted a possession of his vision of restored Israel, more than he wanted Jesus. Judas wielded his power to get what he wants because he loved things more than Jesus. But what you see in this woman is that she yields her power to get near to Jesus because she loves Jesus more than her things. See, it was the Passover and the cleansing of the temple that awoke Jesus, or awoke Judas. But it was this moment of extreme, sacrificial, radical worship that broke Judas, where he said, enough is enough. Because Judas wanted to wield his power to get what he wanted, a vision of a restored Israel. Because he loved that more than he simply wanted to be with Jesus. But this woman, through whom, wherever the gospel is preached, people are going to hear this story because she demonstrates this first example of what God is inviting us into, to love God with our power. She yields her power. And she gives up her things, that jar of perfume, a year's wages. How inefficient. How ridiculous. That is so much power in that jar. It could be sold. It could be used more wisely. Aren't we trying to restore Israel here? Yes, says Jesus, but the Israel we're restoring is not the one you imagine. The Israel you're restoring comes through me and love of me. Comes through radical sacrificial worship of me. So the first step for us is to lay down all of our possessions. What are our alabaster jars? Full of a year's wages that we think are ours. And what would it look like to say, Jesus, you can have that too, because I just want you more than anything else. As this woman, you can almost hear it. You can hear the echo as this woman is pouring the jar, a year's wages just rushing over Jesus' head, anointing him. You can almost hear his voice saying, whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever loves a year's wages or their hair or their reputation more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not pick up their cross, whoever does not lay down their life to be with me, not worthy of me. And please hear me. I'm not saying anything about our salvation today. I'm not saying anything about our salvation because our salvation is not on our merit, it's on his. His faithfulness holds us. What we're talking about was, what does it mean for the life we long for? What does it mean to live a life so overflowing with joy and peace, a true peace, a lasting peace that nothing in this world can steal from us? The invitation from Jesus is that peace comes first and foremost when you lay down the possessions of your life, even your very life. Lay them down. Give them up as an act of worship for me, says Jesus. And out of that relationship, you're going to discover a freedom of joy and peace that is better than anything else you've tasted so far. That's the invitation. The question of the scriptures of, do we trust it? Are we more like the woman or are we more like Judas? Because Judas fought back, he resisted, and ended up resulting in his death. And this woman yielded and surrendered and found peace, and now she's talked about all across the world. If possessions that we love dictate how we use our power, well then loving Jesus, if we want to follow him, that's a big if, guys. I'm not forcing this on anyone, neither is he. I was being very serious about the doors, which would be very awkward if one of you walked out right now. But I'm being dead serious. I'm not selling anybody anything here. I've made a choice. I'm following Jesus. And I realize it might not end up in good things. There are already things in my life that I could have been richer. I could have been this, could have been that. There's scary propositions in this. Do I truly believe? Do I truly believe that God has given me this incredible gift of my 2 sons, but that I say, hey, they're not mine, they're yours, and I lay them down in my heart to go after you, which doesn't mean abandoning them. That's not what he's saying, but it is saying that in my heart, the first and most important relationship is Jesus. That I have no possessions that I fight to withhold. They're all his. This is the good news, though it does not feel it right now. But here's the gift. Here's the gift. And this is why Jesus is not a cult leader. Cults are deep perversions of the kingdom of God. Here's the gift. Because God never asks us to do something that he doesn't do first. Ever. Cult leaders, they ask you to give up your life, give up your possessions, but they're still going to have it. So you got Kim Jong-un who's saying no Western goods, but he's got a garage full of luxury cars and luxury wines, right? That's what cult leaders do. They say, you can't have it, but I'm going to have it. God never does that. He invites us into a very narrow way of life, but he always goes first. Because when God loved us more than his possessions, he gave up his most cherished possession in the life of his son. He came to the earth, not with a sword, but on a cross, laying down his life, not to wield power over us, but to yield his power to us in love, because he wants to be with you for the rest of your existence. How did he love us? He gave us his son. Which brings me back to the election of 2020. I'm going to invite the band back up, and I want to end with this. I was moving into the election 2020 in that week, kind of sad, kind of defeated. I was preparing my message for that Sunday, and it was not going to be a good one. It was going to be a downer. But that was wrong of me. I had despaired. My despair got the best of me. And God had to remind me of that, and he did. And the way he reminded me is that at 10:45 p.m., on election night, November 3rd, right as Arizona was coming live, because we were on the East Coast, my wife, Anna, started to go into labor. And on November 4th, 2020, at 12:15 p.m., my first son, George William Joyce, came into the world. And my heart broke. And I experienced and I remembered the heart of God. Because I was so stunned that in the midst of my sadness and my depression, in the midst of this chaotic, violent, divisive moment, that the heart of God is still one that would give us his most cherished possessions, would give us his children for us to love and receive and give our lives right back to them. In the midst of a moment where would-be kings are promising peace and killing anyone in their way who opposes it, we see the true Prince of Peace, the true King of the world, who does not kill, but gives his son, gives his children, that we might receive and love. How did God love us with his power? He sent his son to die. God does not overpower us. God does not wield anything toward us. God yields his very life in the form of the newborn Jesus. This is not meant to be a Christmas message. I realize it's bordering into that right now. But hey, maybe it's not coincidental that our elections happen around the time of Advent. Because here we are in this season where we're tempted to move fast. We're tempted to exert power. And yet we realize that God's heart chose the way of patience in pregnancy and birth. Here we are, tempted to wage war. And yet we realize that God's heart was revealed in the vulnerability of a newborn child. And here we are, tempted to equate greatness with grandiosity and celebrity. And God's heart chose poverty and hiddenness in a manger, in a barn, not even in a hotel. See, when we're tempted by the would-be messiahs, and we're tempted to align our power with their version of power to bring a peace that kills and establishes and never lasts, because here we are at another election, and yet this poor carpenter with a short itinerant ministry and a death at the hands of Israel and Rome is still being talked about 2,000 years later. Who's got the lasting peace now? It's backwards, it's countercultural, it's against our nature. We want to fight and preserve and win, and there we see Jesus saying, you want to come after me? Pick up the cross. It's going to be sharp, it's going to divide the entire world. Pick up that cross, lay it down, lay it all down. Lay it down with me. Pour out that alabaster jar and worship me. Friends, the kingdom of heaven, the first entry point of our power being exerted into the kingdom of heaven comes when we lay it down in radical, sacrificial, deep, explosive worship of Jesus Christ alone. That is the foundation upon which every other action is built. The way of the cross. Because we're told to elect kings, we're told to grab power, we're told to protect ourselves, and yet we see God saying, "Here is my son. Love him as I have loved you." Would you stand to your feet? Jesus, I sense even I sensed it preparing, but even this moment and this day, this is a sharp message, God. This is a dangerous invitation. Help us not to shy away from the true reality of who you are. Help us not to explain away what we think you meant. Like when you say whoever loves mother and father and son and daughter and life and possessions more than me is not worthy of me. Help us not to explain that away, but like the woman, catch a glimpse of how beautiful you are, how powerful you are, to create a kingdom that is now over 2 billion people strong, all across the world, that came through your death, through your voluntarily laying down your life. And that's who you always were, because when you entered the earth, you didn't enter in power. You entered in yielding your power. You entered in vulnerability and patience and hiddenness. That's who you are. That's the way of you. And Lord, help us to not be led astray by other voices saying we need to protect ourselves and protect our lives. No, we don't. We need to live a life that worships you with everything we are and have. But that's scary, because then you have to be who you say you are. And you have to protect us, and you have to show us that even in painful or joyful circumstances, that the peace you have brought our souls is better than anything else. So be who you say you are, God. We have faith in you today. Be who you say you are. And Lord, if there's anyone in this room who has never picked up that cross and followed you, maybe they've thought you were something else, maybe they had heard a different sort of Jesus, I pray in this moment, Jesus, that they would open wide their hearts and even open wide their hands and say, Lord, I want to receive you. If that's really who you are, if your love is that great that you would give yourself to me and die for me, well then help me to give myself right back to you and die with you. That we would, as you promised, live forever with God. And you went first. You're not making us go first. You already went first, and death could not hold you, as we sang. Therefore, it will not hold us. And Lord, I pray, as we enter into an election these next couple of days, that we would not feel embarrassed about being thoughtful citizens and having opinions, but in our heart of hearts, we would not worship any political candidate. In our heart of hearts, that we would not believe if any political voice is in power, then we'll find the peace we're longing for. That in our hearts, as your followers and as brothers and sisters, we would know that the peace our lives are longing for is found, just like the woman, when we pour out our lives week in and week out, day in and day out, to worship Jesus Christ our Lord. That is what binds us together. That is where our unity is. So would you make us that kind of church, unapologetically, that we would worship you. And so in this next bit of time, Lord, reveal the possessions of our hearts. Reveal the things that we're looking to bring us peace more than the love that is ours in Jesus. And help us to lay it down so that we can know that love and that life that we long for. Jesus, we crown you as our King in this space today. And we bow down our hearts to you alone.